Welcome to my podcast.
Imagine trying to tell a friend where you parked your car and also where you're going to a concert.
Right. Pretty everyday stuff.
Exactly.
Yeah.
In English, it's completely effortless. You just say, the car is in the park and the concert is in the park.
Easy.
But in Spanish, if you use the exact same verb for those two sentences, you have fundamentally broken the laws of reality.
You really have.
You've essentially claimed your car as some abstract concept, or, the concert is just a hunk of metal sitting on the grass.
Yeah, and it immediately flags you, not just as someone who doesn't know vocabulary.
Right.
But as someone who doesn't understand how the universe is actually structured within the language. I mean, you're mapping an English worldview onto a Spanish reality, and the two simply do not align.
That is just wild to me. And welcome, by the way, to today's deep dive. We are exploring a foundational text called Fundamentals of Spanish Noun Classification, Gender, and Number.
Which I admit sounds a little dense.
Oh, I know that title sounds like a completely dry grammar review designed to just put you to sleep. But trust me, this is actually a masterclass in how a different language categorizes reality itself.
It really is a peek into human cognition.
Exactly. So whether you are brushing up for a trip to Madrid, or you're just endlessly fascinated by linguistics, this deep dive is your shortcut to understanding the true personality and the structural code of the Spanish language.
It's a completely different operating system.
Okay, let's unpack this. Where do we even begin to untangle how a different language labels the entire universe?
Well, we have to start with a baseline division of reality. Before we can even worry about, making things masculine or feminine or plural, we really must understand how Spanish sorts entities into these foundational boxes.
Right.
And the most basic split, which actually feels familiar at first, is between proper nouns and common nouns.
That sounds deceptively simple, honestly. Like, proper nouns get capital letters, common nouns don't.
Right, and on the surface, that totally holds true. Proper nouns, or nombres propios, they give a unique identity to a specific thing. So you have anthropónimos, which are human names.
Like Maria or Carlos.
Exactly, or the surname Fernandez. And then you have topónimos, which anchor us in geography.
Like countries or cities.
Yeah, España, Madrid. They function pretty much exactly as they do in English. They're absolute identifiers.
But, and this is where it gets tricky, the illusion of similarity completely breaks down the moment you try to talk about someone using a title of respect. This subtle trap just floored me.
Oh, the title rule, yes.
Because in English, if I want to tell you about a colleague, I just say, Mr. Fernandez is a teacher. It's direct.
Very direct.
But Spanish just throws a huge wrench into that directness.
It does. Spanish requires this grammatical buffer zone. When you are talking about someone using a title, so señor, señora, doctor, you are strictly mandated to use the definite article.
So you can't just say, Señor Fernandez as professor.
No, you absolutely cannot. You must say, Señora Fernandez is professor.
Literally, the Mr. Fernandez is a teacher. I mean, my English brain completely rebels against that. It feels so incredibly formal, almost distancing, Why does it force you to put the in front of a person's name?
Because it acts as a grammatical pointer. In English, the name and the title sort of fuse into one absolute identity. But in Spanish, señor is treated more like a category.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, by adding el, you're specifically pointing to this particular gentleman, Fernandez, out of all the señores in the world.
Okay, that makes sense.
But the nuance here is that if you were talking directly to him, you actually drop the article. You just greet him as Señor Fernandez.
Wait, so the moment he leaves the room?
The moment he leaves and you speak about him in the third person, Spanish demands that article to establish him as a specific subject of the conversation.
Wow. So it forces this constant situational awareness. Like you have to actively adjust your grammar based on whether the person is literally standing in front of you or not. Okay, let's shift over to common nouns, the nombres communs. These are the general categories, right? Everyday objects, concepts. There is a subcategory here about time periods that just really twisted my perspective.
You're thinking of nombres de periodos temporales.
Yes.
These are the words that capture blocks of the day, like la mañana for morning, la tarde for afternoon, la noche for night.
Right. And in English, we just default to the preposition in. We say in the morning or at 3 in the afternoon. It's like a spatial metaphor, like the morning is a physical box that we step inside.
That's a great way to put it. But Spanish handles this with an entirely different flavor. It relies on the words por and de, and it depends completely on your level of precision.
How do you mean?
Well, if you are speaking generally about an action occurring during that block of time, you use por. So por la mañana implies moving through the morning, right? A duration of time.
Okay, like during the morning.
Exactly. But the moment you anchor that time to a specific hour on the clock, the preposition shifts to day. So to say 3 in the afternoon, you say a las 3 de la tarde.
At 3 of the afternoon. I mean, that is just stunningly poetic. It's not a box you're inside anymore. The hour is like a possession that belongs to the afternoon itself.
It's a very different philosophy of time.
It really is. I love how these tiny prepositions reveal that. But I hit a massive wall trying to figure out how Spanish handles events, going back to my opening scenario with the car and the concert.
Right, the park scenario.
Yeah. How can two nouns be treated so radically differently when they are both just subjects of a sentence?
What's fascinating here is that we are hitting the dividing line between space and time.
Okay.
Spanish formally recognizes a category called event nouns, or nombres eventivos. These are nouns that simply do not have a permanent physical form.
So things like la clase, the class.
Yes. Or el concierto, the concert. La reunión for a meeting, la batalla for a battle. They are inherently transient. They imply an action that is unfolding over a sequence of minutes or hours.
Right. Because think of a car. A car is a lump of metal taking up space. It displaces air, you can touch it. But a concert is an experience taking up time. It's just a temporary gathering of energy and sound waves that exists for a bit and then it vanishes. But why does this distinction matter so much for a Spanish learner?
Because of that transient, time-bound nature, Spanish imposes a profound grammatical implication. Event nouns take place.
They happened.
Exactly. And because they take place in time, you are required to use the verb ser to indicate their location. Now, ser is typically associated with permanent identity, right?
Like, I am tall or I'm a person.
Yes, but for event nouns, it translates functionally to takes place or is held.
Oh, wow. So to locate the concert, I have to say, el concierto es en el parque. The concert takes place in the park.
Spot on. But physical objects, your lump of metal taking up space, demand the verb estar for physical location. Estar deals with state and placement.
So to tell someone where I parked, I have to shift verbs entirely.
Yes, you must say, el coche está en el parque.
That is just, I mean, you aren't just memorizing vocabulary words here. You are constantly evaluating the metaphysical nature of everything you talk about.
You really are.
You literally have to look at a noun and ask yourself, is this a physical object existing in space, or is this an experience unfolding in time? Like, because if you pick the wrong verb, you sound like you're experiencing a hallucination.
You sound like you think the concert is a physical building, yes.
Okay, so we figured out how Spanish splits the universe into space and time. But what about the physical objects themselves? How do we label them? Because this brings us to, like, the most infamous categorization system in the language, grammatical gender.
Ah, yes, the great illusion of gender in objects. For an English speaker, this is a monumental cognitive hurdle.
It totally shatters the English brain. Because we have this wonderfully neutral safety net, which is the word it.
It is very convenient.
Right. A chair is an it. A cloud is an it. But in Spanish, the concept of it for an inanimate object essentially doesn't exist. Every single noun is male or female.
Yes, but we must clarify, you have to decouple this concept from biological sex entirely. Grammatical gender has absolutely nothing to do with biological traits.
Right. It's not like the table is wearing makeup.
Exactly. A table, la mesa,
Yes, sir.
does not possess feminine qualities. A book, a libro, does not exude masculinity. Grammatical gender is a purely structural sorting mechanism. It just dictates the architecture of the sentence.
I always think of it less like biological sex and more like structural engineering.
How do you mean?
Like, think of every noun as a block with a specifically shaped plug. It's either a type A plug for masculine or a type B plug for feminine. So any adjective or article you want to attach to that noun needs to have the corresponding socket.
That's a great analogy.
Yeah, if you have a masculine noun plug, you need a masculine adjective socket, or the sentence simply won't snap together. So what are the baseline rules? How do we identify the shape of the plug?
The baseline rules are actually incredibly consistent. If a noun ends in the letter O, it is almost always masculine. El libro, the book. El perro, the dog.
Simple enough.
And if a noun ends in the letter A, it is overwhelmingly feminine. La mesa, the table. La casa, the house.
But of course, language is never that tidy. If every word ended in an O or an A, we wouldn't need a deep dive into this. There are whole categories of nouns with completely different endings.
True, but recognizing those special endings is a massive shortcut. For feminine nouns, you look for specific suffixes. Words ending in sacion, ciondad, or dad, tad are universally feminine.
Those endings are a dead giveaway, like la estación for the station, la ciudad for the city, la libertad, freedom. The moment I see that la estación, I know I need the feminine type B socket.
You've got it. But then you run into the masculine exceptions, and these actively try to trick you. Yes, there are nouns that end in a perfectly feminine-looking A, but they are strictly masculine. These usually end in a ma or a ka.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting. And frankly, a little infuriating for a modern learner, because we are sitting here today just trying to string a basic sentence together, and we are being punished by the linguistic choices of ancient Greeks from thousands of years ago.
It's true. It is a perfect example of language acting as a fossil record.
How did they even get there?
Well, when the Roman Empire conquered the Iberian Peninsula, they brought Latin, which eventually evolved into Spanish. But the Romans themselves had borrowed heavily from ancient Greek for complex, abstract concepts.
Yeah.
And Spanish inherited those Greek loanwords completely intact.
So words like el problema, the problem, el idioma, the language, el planeta, the planet, they all end in an A. Every instinct tells an English speaker they should be feminine.
Right.
But because some philosopher in Athens coined the term millennia ago, we just have to memorize that they take the masculine L.
You are literally honoring linguistic history every single time you say el problema.
I'll try to remember that next time I get it wrong.
But while Greek loanwords refuse to match their endings to their gender, there is another category of words that refuse to change their endings at all. These are invariable nouns.
Oh, I know these. These are words where the spelling is totally locked in, regardless of the biological sex of the human you're talking about, right?
Exactly. They usually end in ista or ente.
I always picture these words like a unisex jacket. The jacket itself, the actual physical noun, never changes shape or size. It just takes on the identity of whoever decides to put it on.
That's exactly how it works. The noun is fixed, and the context provides the gender through the article. So the word artista is the jacket. When a man wears it, he applies the masculine article, el artista.
And when a woman wears it, she applies the feminine article, la artista.
Yes, same with el estudiante and la estudiante, or el dentista and la dentista. Only the article changes. Structural plug changes, but the noun remains identical.
Okay, so that's the unisex jacket. But sitting on the complete opposite end of the spectrum, we have heteronomy, which is where Spanish just abandons the root word entirely and uses completely different vocabulary for biological male and female entities.
Which shouldn't be too surprising because English leans heavily on heteronomy as well.
That's true.
We don't say man and woman man or, bull and lady bull. We use distinct words, man and woman, bull and cow, king and queen.
Right, and Spanish does the exact same thing for specific human and animal relationships. You don't take the word for man, hombre, and slap an A on it to make hombra. The word for woman is entirely different. It's mujer.
Exactly. El padre is the father, la madre is the mother, el caballo is the stallion, while la yegua is the mare.
It's a whole different vocabulary set.
It is. And if we connect this to the bigger picture, consider the sheer cognitive load this places on the language learner's brain.
It's exhausting.
In English, you walk down a street and you process a sequence of neutral objects, a tree, a car, a building. You aren't categorizing them structurally. But in Spanish, grammatical gender demands a hyper-awareness of your physical environment.
You literally cannot open your mouth to form a basic observation without first running the subconscious background algorithm. Like, I see a tree. Tree is arbol. Is it masculine or feminine? Does it have a special ending? Is it Greek? Okay, masculine arbol. Now I need a masculine adjective. It's an entirely different rhythm of thought.
It forces a constant active engagement with the world around you.
Okay, so we have successfully labeled a single object. We know if it exists in space or time, and we figured out which structural gender plug it uses. But what happens when reality multiplies? How does the Spanish brain handle plurals?
Well, the good news is making things plural in Spanish is delightfully systematic. It's highly logical. It is pure phonetics and mathematical addition based entirely on the final letter of the singular noun.
Oh, thank goodness. After surviving the ancient Greek traps, a little systematic math is a huge relief.
It's very straightforward. The first rule is simple addition. If the noun ends in a vowel, A, E, I, O, or U, you simply add the letter S.
So el libro becomes los libros, la casa, becomes las casas.
Exactly. Just tack on an S exactly like English.
But what if the word ends in a hard consonant?
If it ends in a consonant, you add ES. El hotel becomes los hoteles. La ciudad becomes las ciudades. You're adding a whole extra syllable to ensure the plural is clearly vocalized.
Okay, the logic holds up until we hit the inevitable curveball, the Z curveball. Because if a word ends in the letter Z, the rules suddenly change, don't they?
They do, though. It's less of a rule change and more of a phonetic preservation tactic.
What do you mean?
Well, if a noun ends in Z, you cannot simply add ES. You're required to change the Z to a C and then add the ES.
Give me an example.
Take the word for fish, el pez,
Yeah.
P-E-Z. To make it plural, you actually spell it P-E-C-E-S, los peces.
But why go through the trouble of swapping the letters? Why not just write it P-E-Z-E-S and call it a day?
Because Spanish orthography, the spelling system itself, despises the letter Z, followed by an E or an I.
Really?
Yes, it's a spelling convention designed to keep the soft S or TH sound consistent. The letter C before an E makes that soft sound perfectly, so the language swaps the letters to maintain phonetic integrity while keeping the spelling rules clean.
That is actually a brilliant little phonetic workaround. But while pez requires a spelling swap, there are some words that just refuse to multiply at all. Our source text highlights invariable words, words that look completely identical whether you have one of them or 100 of them.
Right, the invariable plurals. These are typically words that already end in an unstressed S. The noun is sort of phonetically maxed out.
Maxed out.
Yeah. Days of the week are prime examples. Monday is at lunes. It ends in S. If you want to talk about Monday's plural, the noun lunes does not change. The article does the heavy lifting. It becomes los lunes.
So the singular and plural noun are absolutely identical.
Exactly. El cumpleaños, the birthday, becomes los cumpleaños.
Yeah.
El paraguas, the umbrella, becomes los paraguas.
It's as if the word physically cannot hold another S sound without sounding ridiculous. So Spanish just leaves it alone and lets the word los indicate the quantity.
It's highly efficient.
Yeah.
But we haven't touched on my favorite category of plurals, the concept of lexical duals.
Oh, the ultimate aha moment of this entire deep dive. I love this part.
It's fascinating. Lexical duals are nouns that refer to a single item that consists of two identical symmetrical parts. We use them constantly in everyday life. Glasses, pants, scissors.
Right. So what does this all mean for a language learner? Because in English, we are pathologically obsessed with treating these single items as multitudes. I look everywhere and say, where are my pants? We call them a pair of pants, demanding a plural verb for literally one single piece of fabric that I put on my legs.
And this raises an important question, doesn't it? Which language's framework is actually more logical? Because Spanish gives the learner the flexibility to view these items accurately from two different perspectives.
Exactly, because if I have one pair of pants sitting on my bed, Spanish rules allow me to say el pantalón, using the singular form.
Yes, you can.
Or I can say los pantalones, using the plural form. Both are grammatically correct and both refer to the exact same single garment.
Because the language recognizes the duality of the object. It acknowledges that, yes, it has two symmetrical legs, or two lenses in the case of glasses, las gafas, or two blades for scissors, las tijeras. So the plural makes logical sense.
Right.
But it also acknowledges that these parts are fused into one functional unified tool. So the singular, la gafa or la tijera, is equally valid. It offers the speaker a choice in how they perceive the object.
It is infinitely more forgiving than English. Spanish looks at a pair of pants and says, look, it's one unified thing, but it has two legs. Call it whatever feels right to you today. It just removes that bizarre English pretense that I am wearing multiple independent garments on my lower half.
It's a very practical approach to reality. It really is. Well, let's pull all these threads together. Look at the immense journey we've just taken through the architecture of a language. We started by realizing that Spanish forces you to become a philosopher of space and time.
Choosing a star for physical objects like cars and SIR for transient events like concerts.
Exactly. Then we tackled the structural engineering of grammatical gender, realizing it has zero to do with biology and everything to do with matching the right O or A plugs to the right sockets while dodging ancient Greek traps like el problema.
Can't forget the Greeks.
Never. And finally, we uncovered the phonetic math of plurals. From swapping a Z for a C to preserve a sound, all the way to understanding why asking for a singular pant, el pantalón, makes perfect logical sense.
You really do now possess the blueprint. But I want to leave you with a thought that extends beyond just the grammar rules.
Oh, please do.
We've examined the intense mechanics required to speak this language. The constant categorization of space, time, male, female, singular, and symmetrical. Think about the psychological impact of running that code in your brain all day. It's got to be huge.
Does having a grammatical structure that forces you to assign a structural gender to a tree, a building, or a cloud subtly rewire your perception of a simple walk down the street? Does it fundamentally change the texture of how you interact with the physical world compared to moving through a completely neutral, genderless English landscape of its?
Wow. Does the structural code we speak dictate the reality we experience? That is a massive question to chew on. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Keep questioning how the words you use shape the world around you, and we will catch you next time.